Welcome back, folks. My name is Joseph Igo, and well, if you ordered another week of controversy in the NASCAR Cup Series, you got it. Because, wow, we have a lot to discuss after that wild Atlanta race. I guess let's just get straight into it. So, Christopher Bell gets his 10th career Cup Series victory in Atlanta. Getting it with the caution flying as the field was in turn three. Uh, I mean, and that's gonna be the whole talk this week. Was that the right call? Was that not? And look, I mean, as far as was it the right call on NASCAR's end? Yes, they made it clear before that race that they had screwed up the night before with the Xfinity race when they let Austin Hill race back to the line. They made it clear in the drivers' meeting, supposedly, that if another situation arose like that, that they would waive the caution. And it was pretty much identical to the Xfinity race and how that ended. So, look, I hate that it ended that way because it was setting up to be an identical finish to the three wide finish last year. But, you know, by the book and by NASCAR's discretion, did they make the right call? Yes. The thing that I just have a big problem with is you couldn't even see the wreck in the TV shot, and I get it, and trust me, I get it. The TV shot is can be very narrow at times and not super wide. Completely get it, but man, that was so. Let's just break down what we could have witnessed there. We could have witnessed, in my opinion, the first and the second best driver in NASCAR, Christopher Bell or Kyle Larson and Christopher Bell, and racing it out to the line in a potential photo finish and then you have Carson Hocevar having the best race of his Cup Series career and causing a lot of enemies on the way, which we'll get into all of that later down the line. But Carson Hocevar, it was going to be a three wide finish between the two best drivers in NASCAR and the young gun who is making a lot of controversy for himself, especially in the race we were watching. So, yes, I get it. I completely get why we should not be racing back to the line like that. 100% get it. But man, you cannot blame anybody for feeling that you got robbed of a potential repeat of last year's finish in this race. So, yeah, I'm disappointed, but I do think NASCAR made the right call. And yeah, so first win of the season for Christopher Bell, who I said this was going to be his breakout year, and I did not think he was going to be winning in Atlanta. I did mention on the pre-race show that I thought Bell would be a contender for potentially winning this race. I didn't pick him. I picked Ryan Blaney, and we'll get into Blaney's day later on in the show. But yeah, I think this is a huge win for Christopher Bell. I think this is massive because this would have been the exact same thing had Kyle Larson won, because we all know both these drivers, two of the best in NASCAR. I go as far as to say one and two is in the entire NASCAR world, but we both know that these two guys are not exactly the best at super speedway racing. And of course that's all we talked about this past week. And then what do you know? We end up with those two battling it out at the end for the win, which is crazy. But back to Bell, this is like almost stealing a win that you were not supposed to get. I'm trying to think of a good example of this. Like I'm trying to think. This is like, I don't know if any of you guys are soccer fans, but this is like going on the road and beating like Manchester United or Manchester City on the road. Obviously, Manchester United's not very good right now, but this is not a soccer video. But it's like going on the road and getting a win you were not supposed to get. Like, I bet Christopher Bell, if he just, mustered a top 10 today or just kept the car clean, he probably would have left Atlanta pretty happy. He probably didn't walk in expecting to win this race, but he left with a trophy and a guaranteed playoff spot. So, what does that do now? I mean, he's got house money to play with now until the playoffs, and I think he will definitely rattle off at least a couple more wins before the playoffs, and then in the playoffs, who knows? We'll have to see. But yeah, congrats, Christopher Bell. Maybe not. I hate to say it, not deserving, because You could say that about a lot of races and race wins throughout the year, but you know, I think a part of racing that's a huge talking point right now is luck and the luck factor. And I think you got to have luck if you want to win some of these races, you know? I don't think we should be faulting drivers for having luck. And I do think Christopher Bell, I don't think he got lucky. I think he got lucky when the caution was thrown because, if they would have waited a second, he gets side drafted and the win may have gone to Kyle Larson. So I guess in that situation, he's lucky. But uh, no, I don't think we should be getting on drivers for getting lucky or anything because that's just part of racing. I think about how many wins we would have to take away from drivers in history if we were, basing it off luck. Like, yeah, no, luck is a huge part of racing. So, congrats, Christopher Bell, and yeah, huge win for him, and excited to see where his season goes because I predicted it to be a huge one. So, let's get into just how this race played out just in kind of in chronological order, and then we'll get into some of these finishers that you see down below and what I think of some of them. But early on in this race, it was the Penske show with obviously the three Penske cars and Josh Berry for the Wood brothers up running 1, 2, 3, 4. I think for the early part of this race, the two dominant cars were no doubt Austin Cindric and Joey Logano. We had Ryan Blaney who started on the pole, but he did not. I mean, for those first stage or two, he did not have the best car, and it definitely not a car to lead. I think he got a good break there having some of his teammates in the front because he did not fire off with the best car on Sunday. That is, obviously he won the pole on Saturday, but clearly did not have the best car when that race started. As this race goes on, we'll get into what happens with Blaney, but he definitely worked on his car throughout the day and got it better. So that was interesting to see. Stage one goes to Josh Berry. Great performance for Josh Berry. I believe I saw something crazy. It's like the most laps led by the Wood brothers since like 1993 or something. Huge day for the Wood brothers and Josh Berry. Obviously was really competitive last week. So definitely looks like that 21 car's got some juice in it. I think got a better driver in it than last year. I think they'll be definitely in contention to win some races later down the line this year. And I think, one I think they will be competitive at is Phoenix. Whether they win that race or not, I don't know, but I think that's a race to keep an eye on for these guys for sure. I think the big story of the first two stages of this race was how clean it was. There was no there was some wrecks. Like, don't get me wrong, we had some spinouts, but there was no big pileup, no big one early on, and which I really appreciated especially after last week when it was just nothing but calamity for specific parts of the race. And yeah, I love that. And then what got us to see was some interesting strategy start to play out. Towards the end of that second stage, we saw them split the field, split the strategy. You saw a group of cars pit before the end of the stage and then stay out at the end of the stage, which created an interesting dynamic. And then that's how you ended up with Kyle Larson and a bunch of those Hendrick guys at the front contending for the stage win, and then Kyle Larson ends up with the stage win. So good for him. That'll be a valuable point down the road. But also kind of like we were saying with Christopher Bell, it's almost like you're stealing one of these, or steal anything you get at these super speedways. If you're those two guys, almost feels like a bonus, and they walked away with a lot more than a bonus this weekend. So very good for those two guys, no doubt. I think the strongest cars of the whole day were, like I said, Logano, Cindric. I think you could throw William Byron in that mix. You could throw Kyle Larson. I think Larson had a good car because he was competitive for a lot of that race, even when he wasn't leading. Alex Bowman, who ended up getting wrecked out in one of these wrecks later on that I'm forgetting exactly which one it was. But Alex Bowman looked really good. Like we mentioned, Carson Hocevar. He looked really good. We got a lot more to get to with him. Ricky Stenhouse, who ends up wrecking Chase Elliott. He kind of ends up getting him into the wall off turn 3, kind of similar to how Larson does later in the race to Cindric. um, just at a different part of the racetrack. But he gets into Elliott, who then Elliott kind of looks like he's trying to save it, but something's going wrong with the car. And then you have LaJoy come up from behind him, nail Elliott, sends him into the wall. And then as Elliott's bouncing off the wall, you got the six of Keselowski coming up. So not a good situation there, but just kind of some, you know, that's kind of, I don't want to say poor racing, but it's just kind of what happens on a track like this. Atlanta, really narrow and super intense that, even if you're not trying to run the guy up into the wall, sometimes it just happens. So, and I think one of the craziest things about this wreck is that Elliott ends up coming back to finish this race in 15th on the lead lap. I can't believe that maybe he fell a few laps back during the race and ended up making them back, but I'm forgetting. It says he completed all the laps, so he finished on the lead lap, but I don't know how many waiver rounds he took, because I know Michael McDowell, which this is actually an insane stat. Michael McDowell got 6 waiver rounds. He was 6 laps down and got back on the lead lap. That is unheard of. I saw some stats earlier, but I'm forgetting exactly what they were. But that's like historic. What happened there? That was crazy. But let's see here. So, like I said, we had the group of drivers who ended up flipping the stage and getting on the alternate strategy, which ends up putting Shane Van Gisbergen and Ross Chastain at the front of the field towards the beginning, or at the beginning of the final stage. It seemed like a fairly calm final stage until that wreck on lap 184. I'm forgetting how this really initiated, but I do know that Ty Gibbs got a huge brunt of it, took some huge shots on it. Daniel Suarez was in it. Cole Custer, Noah Gragson, JJ Yaley, Cody Ware. That was the big pileup of the day. It wasn't the final wreck of the day, but it was probably the biggest overall pileup. And yeah, really none of these cars were super impactful in terms of the race. But, I think of these cars that we mentioned here, I think the one that really just, left Atlanta disappointed was Daniel Suarez, because, obviously getting that win last year in Atlanta, and pretty much everybody's saying that Daniel Suarez is on the hot seat, and we'll see how legitimate that is. But I think it's pretty legitimate. I think he's going to have to win a race or two straight up, and not kind of in one, you don't want to say fluky fashion about that 3-wide finish last year, but I think for him to save his job, he's got to win multiple races straight up being the best car. And I just don't see that happening, honestly. Maybe at one of these road courses he figures it out. Maybe he gets lucky at a super speedway, but he's going to have to prove it to me at these intermediates and the short tracks, cuz I'm not buying it. I think he's done, but this was a huge opportunity for him to run well and, get a good head start on the season, and not going to happen for him. So that sucks for Daniel. Hate to see it for him, but that's just how things go at these things. So is what it is, but yeah, it's unfortunate. So, and then obviously, so how this race ends up playing out at the end, you end up with the Ryan Blaney incident when he gets spun out by Carson Hocevar, who I guess we could just let's touch on Blaney and then we'll get into Hocevar. But so Blaney, like I kind of said earlier, didn't appear to have the best car, especially for starting in the pole. He just got off to a terrible start, and he kind of disappeared, but then was able to work his way back to the front, get some work done on the car, and they looked to be super mega charged up towards the end of that race. And he wasn't in the front, but he was, I believe, leading the bottom lane at the time when he was wrecked. And yeah, obviously had some choice words for Hocevar, and that really is about it for Blaney. It's miraculous he ends up finishing 4th. That's insane. The fact he ended up finishing 4th, I think it's a testament to Blaney and the speed that they brought, but I think it's also a testament to Atlanta Motor Speedway and being able to be a super speedway while also enabling the handling on these cars to, allow for something like Ryan Blaney, or somebody like Ryan Blaney, to drive through while he maybe didn't start with the best car, but definitely finished with probably one of the best cars in the field, and able to come up to it with a fourth place finish after wrecking with like 27 laps to go. I mean, it's very impressive. So, yeah, so I think let's just get into Hocevar then, because obviously one of the biggest talking points of the whole weekend. Carson Hocevar had the best race of his career. He also may have had the worst in terms of getting on other people's nerves. Let's see drivers he had issues with. Kyle Busch went on a very heated rampage in the car about Carson Hocevar and even flipped him off under caution. So, surprisingly enough, Kyle Busch was pretty reserved and didn't really go too hard on him on pit road. But yeah, I think Carson's gonna have to be a little careful with Rowdy going forward. But then some other drivers who had issues with, like I said, Ryan Blaney. Ryan Blaney went up to him and talked to him after the race, but it seemed as though things were pretty cordial there. So nothing too crazy on that front. But and then obviously Ross Chastain went up and talked to him, and it's funny to see the people who are like, "Wow, you really screwed up to have Ross Chastain come and talk to you about your aggressive driving," but it is what it is. I mean, that's kind of just the thing with these young guns. Like all these guys, Logano, uh, Bush, Stenhouse, all the Keselowski, Chastain, Hamlin, all of these guys had that learning period or that learning curve in the Cup Series where they were one of those guys who were getting talked to by the older generation and kind of getting on the nerves of people. But he'll figure it out. I guarantee you he will. And I mean, just look at the speed like Hocevar's been able to show. Maybe not last week at Daytona, but especially this week and the end of last year, we're starting to see what that kid's made of, and we all know, especially with what he did in trucks, that the speed's there. The speed's there. You just got to get him the right equipment and make sure he doesn't get in his own way. And I think especially the getting in your own way part, that'll go away with time. So yeah, super excited to see where Carson Hocevar goes this year. He was definitely one of my picks coming into the year for, a breakout driver. And we'll see. Obviously, it's a super speedway, so kind of anything can happen. But I mean, he was running consistently in the top 5 or 10 cars almost the whole day. So very, very impressive stuff there from Carson Hocevar. And then I guess we can touch on Kyle Larson one more time. It's funny how these things work in NASCAR sometimes. Like, one week you'll literally have your boss saying, "Oh yeah, his confidence is lost on these super speedways." Next, you'll be a couple inches from winning on a super speedway. So I guess that's what happens when you're Kyle Larson and you're just the biggest, baddest race car driver in the world. So yeah, impressive stuff from Larson, even with some shot confidence, if you will. So good for him. And Ricky Stenhouse, just kind of. I mean, he was up there, but it didn't really feel like he was contending for a win. Was it just me? It just didn't feel like he was there, but he really wasn't there. I don't know if that's just me or not, but I mean, this is just typical Ricky Stenhouse on a super speedway, always putting in good runs there, but we'll have to see how that pans out to other tracks. I think we know how that will probably go, but another solid run for him. Let's keep going down the list here. Denny Hamlin, surprising sixth place finish, honestly. I thought it's funny when this race started, or watching the pre-race show, I mean, when he mentioned how they took speed out of that car for more handling. In the back of my head, I was like, they are making the same mistake that they did in Atlanta last year. And what happened? Pretty much the same thing. I mean, they finished sixth, which feels almost fake because they were nowhere to be found in contention late in this race. But I like I said, I thought they screwed up with that, taking the speed out of the car for handling, and for the most part, that's really what happened. They were nowhere near the front for a lot of this day, and were definitely not contending for any win or any stage points for that matter. So, yeah, I mean, kind of a disappointing day from Denny Hamlin. I thought, after last year's debacle at this track, I would have thought, they would have came out with a little more speed than handling, like he said. So, is what it is there, but Let's keep going on the line here. Kyle Busch was in contention at times, but really towards the end of it wasn't really a threat for the win at the end. But that's a good finish for Kyle Busch. Not the greatest. I definitely would have, if I'm Kyle Busch, would have wanted to maybe get a chance at the win, but is what it is. Bubba Wallace. Bubba Wallace had was tied for the most points leaving Atlanta yesterday. Collected I believe the most stage points combined out of anybody. But yeah, so great day for Bubba Wallace. Continues to run well in these drafting tracks, and we'll see as now we start to get into more different types of tracks. We'll definitely have to see how Bubba does, but definitely off to a fast start. And in my opinion, even with Christopher Bell's win, I would still have to say Bubba has probably been the fastest Toyota of the bunch in the two races. So, yeah, uh, keep it up, Bubba. Doing well. So, another driver who I think is really interesting, also from the Toyota camp, is John Hunter Nemechek. 2 straight top tens to start the year. Great results for them. Wasn't really in contention for this one, but did end up finishing in the top 10. But, I think any back-to-back top tens for Legacy Motor Club is really big at the moment. So great result there for John Hunter Nemechek. Let's see here. Any more interesting results? Chase Elliott in 20th. Chase Elliott, want to talk about not really in contention most of the day? That was pretty much Chase Elliott. It just didn't really feel like he had anything. It didn't feel like they had any push to the front at all. Don't really remember anything about their day, and I think that just kind of defines how it went for them. Sucks because those 3 of the 4 Hendrick cars were contenders at points throughout this race, and I don't really ever recall ever seeing Elliott up there. So, yeah, but Elliott was great last week, and I think he'll be good in the next couple weeks, for the next couple weeks. I think he will be in contention for wins. So, not really too concerned there, but just expected a little more out of the 9 car this week. Let's see. Any more interesting results? Josh Berry finishing in 25th, ran a lot better than that finish says, but yeah. Great first 2 weeks, though, I think, for Josh Berry. If they can add on to this, it's going to be interesting to see where they end up, 5-6 weeks down the line and where that leaves them points-wise. So, very interesting storyline to watch there. Obviously, you got Alex Bowman and William Byron. And these 3, Alex Bowman, William Byron, and Austin Cindric. Obviously, Byron and Bowman, the Hendrick boys, and then Cindric, Penske. Yeah, I don't really know exactly. I know Byron and Cindric were wrecked, but I think... Let me look here. Okay, so it looks like Cindric did wreck out, so I didn't see that, but the other 2 did finish the race running. All 3 of those guys were contenders to win this race for sure. Just got taken out via wrecks at various points, and is what it is. I'm not worried about any of those 3 drivers, but maybe Austin Cindric, just from the fact that he has not been as competitive at the non-super speedway tracks, whereas those other 2 definitely have. But I mean, as far as contending for the playoffs, I just don't think Austin Cindric will be doing that this year. But I do think the other 2 will. Just, sucks when you got a chance to contend for a win and you get wrecked out, especially if you're Austin Cindric here, because those opportunities are not going to be coming around too much this year. But yeah, so anyways, I think that'll do it. So thank you all so much for watching, and keep it tuned in here. Got some more coverage as we head into COTA this upcoming weekend. And yeah, thank you all so much for watching. Take care, and God bless.